Something about youth hockey out west. So in Ontario, as I was kind of saying before, I go on tangents all over the place. What we have here is like there's if you're not playing AAA and you're a pretty good player, it's I'm not saying that there's no chance, but it's like if you're a pretty good player, you're probably playing AAA or AA. You're not traveling like here, even in Windsor. We're at the south end, the southernmost part of Ontario, right next to Detroit, and like we don't have to travel far really. Like Toronto's only 3 hours, Ottawa's only like seven. So like playing AAA hockey is not a hard thing to do. Whereas you get out west, um, what I noticed is that there was a lot of academies and all these things like that, and maybe AAA hockey is like it might be a real grinder. Maybe it's almost non-existent. What? So that was when I was looking at all the academies and stuff. I said, like, why do they do it like that out there? And I just didn't have a really good understanding of how it works out west. So can you like do your best? It's kind of to educate our people that listen to us out west or in remote areas in the U.S. even or out east. What's your take on that? Like, if you're not playing if you don't live in Vancouver, playing in the Vancouver system or something like that, like, is that kind of why the academies are taking off so much? And is it? I don't want to say is it necessary, or maybe that is the question. I'm not really sure. Um,
Um,
just go ahead and talk about it in any way you want.
yeah, no, we can have a discussion about it. Obviously, for me, it would just be completely personal theory, and
Hmm.
like my boys, my two oldest boys, are both in Rink Kelowna Academy, right? So they're
Yep.
part of the CSSHL, as it's called out here, right? The Canadian
Yep.
Sports School Hockey League, and yeah, I mean I mean, maybe we should start like digress. I mean, when I came up, there was AAA hockey. That's what there was. There was one
Okay.
league. It was AAA. That's where all the best players were.
Yep.
The geographic regions were set. I don't know if it was better or worse, but you knew where every good player was,
Yep.
right? Like
Yep.
there was one
Yep.
place to find them. Uh, as time went on, I think it started with Ryan Smith out here. Like he developed this HSL out of Alberta, so this Hockey Super League, he called it. And I'm not sure what his grievances were with Hockey Canada because he's considered Captain Canada, right? Which is kind of ironic in of itself. But
Okay. So
uh,
it is that Ryan Smith. I
yeah,
thought this.
that Ryan
Okay.
Smith
All right.
started it. But back in the day, and now it's like thriving. Like I don't know, 200-300 teams or whatever across youth hockey and in Alberta, and it's expanded into there's some teams in BC, and so this privatized model, of like we'll do it our way, kind of right, and not have any regulations or sanctions. Um, was a piece of it, right? So people started to think more outside the box. I think about like, okay, what is available and what can we do, and what do we want to have ownership of, and then with the Canadian Sports School League, I mean, where that comes into the evolution, I'm not 100% sure because I mean they've been around a while. It's just
Mhm.
been like a massive amount of expansion in the last little while. But once they came on board, like that was the one when they came on board in whatever capacity they did in their infancy, it attracted the best players. And why I think it attracted the best players was because of their access to ice. So now all of a sudden they opened up the ice model of when rinks were empty, right? Which is really, I
Yep.
think, the exact key of the whole thing is like they're not fighting for the previous prime hours, right? The after
True.
school to go to bedtime. So now they can actually offer practices at a discounted ice rate during the day. You
Yep.
can offer more ice time, and you can
Yep.
also, you're not paying them as much for it. So now you combine with the school. So like my son, for instance, or both of them, I think it's the most, to be honest, in the entire CSSHL, but they get
Mhm.
2 hour practices every day.
It's a lot.
So he's on the ice 10 hours a week, right? If they're not
Yeah.
traveling for hockey. So, I mean, we could argue that aspect too. Is that actually too much or what? But
That's my question.
yeah. I mean, is
Not
it
that
too
we'll
much? Is
talk
it
about it
not? But
after, but
it's a
yeah.
lot, you know what I mean? And it's a lot, and I mean, you talk about reps and talk about all that stuff. If you're getting good ice time and you're using it to your advantage, I think for me, I do think it is a great, it's a great selling feature. And then plus you play that, like they're in there from the start of school, which is September, whatever, 1, and they go to the middle of June. Like they cut back on the ice once the hockey season ends. But like now as a hockey parent, I don't have to worry about spring hockey, let's say for them, or spring development. Like that's handled inside the program. They're still going to school. They still do it during the day. They still get their workouts. They get their mobility sessions. They get their hockey classroom sessions, right? Like it's it's a thing. You know what I mean? Like it's definitely a thing. So when the CSSHL came in, they started attracting the best players. So now there was like this fracture of like, okay, who is going where, and then it's like a keep up with the Joneses, right? Like where do you go? And then you start seeing more kids get drafted from the CSSHL. So then there's more clamoring from parents to be like, well, this is where everyone's going, this is where everyone's watching, this is where the exposure is the highest. So now, yeah, like in BC, to bring this kind of full circle, there's, I believe that there's too many academies in British Columbia for how many hockey players there are. So we're starting to get like it's a little bit watered down. Like some of the better programs are solid and traditionally are solid and will always
Yeah.
have good teams. Some of them aren't what I would call at the prep level. Like they're not quite there yet. They still participate in the same league. And then you have the AAA stream, which is the BC hockey stream, or the AJ Alberta hockey is like, you know, the AAA stream as well. The AAA stream in Alberta is much healthier because I believe there's only 3 or 4 academies in all of Alberta, whereas BC has 7, I think. So some of these remote areas, right? And we're talking U15, right? Is where
Yeah.
this thing starts at. So we're,
Yeah.
I mean, if you people don't want to bill it at 14, which I totally get, right? And
Yeah.
so, you know, you can stay home, but the idea here is, I guess I'm jumping all over the place. Like BC, I think that the AAA league in general isn't as good as the prep. I think that's pretty much non-debatable, right? Like
Yep.
for the most part, the prep team, for like the good prep teams will beat the good AAA teams.
Yep.
Um, and that's just because there's not enough players, right? So for me,
Yep.
like that's where it gets a little bit sad, and it's also way too expensive. Like it's too expensive for AAA out here, and it's also too expensive for prep. And prep's more expensive in AAA, but again, I said like you get a longer season, you get more access to ice, you get these things that you don't get at AAA. But it's tough. I mean, I think that's the biggest issue hockey has to solve, and I don't know what it's like out there for you guys, but like it's too damn expensive. Like it's
Well,
too
that's
damn expensive.
it's just you opened up a lot of things that we could talk about here. To be honest with you, I really I like this because it's number one, hockey's expensive. There's no question about it. Um, I can't understand why a stick has to cost $400 now, and skates are 1,000, and then you have to buy the blades to boot. You know, and then it's the cost of everything, and you have to have matching bags, jerseys. It comes out of the parents' pockets. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So what happened here in Ontario? This is what I've seen is in 2000. So when I started my business, and everything previous to that was your obviously your best players played AAA, and there was one team for the area, and you know, more or less the best players played, or the players that can afford it that were the best players got to play. Then they would add, so a county has an extra team now, so now there's 2 AAA teams. So I was watching, and I was just kind of seeing, probably around my when my kid was, you know, let's say 2005 to 2009, there was I saw that when I was doing clinics, probably early 2000s, if I had a camp that said AAA, double A hockey player, it was very, there was several double A players that could maybe take spots in AAA, and then all of a sudden it was like almost impossible to find that. So I don't know what happened. If it, you know, I can't even tell you what happened. But then I started seeing, okay, coming from Windsor, Ontario is not good enough. So I got to go play AAA in Toronto, and kids moving to different centers, and nothing was ever good enough. And I'm like,
Right.
this is getting ridiculous. I mean, Aaron Ekblad never left our area, and he was a first overall in every level he ever played, right? So it seems like if you're good enough, then you should be able to make it. But this is the thing, right? It drives that, you know, like you said, keeping up with the Joneses. If he's doing that, I need to do that. So then the private schools started in Ontario. I would say probably 2010, real quiet. Like there were some older ones like St. Andrews and Ridley, and then the Hill Academy started. Then all of a sudden they started popping up, and I started looking at it. And I'm going, like, especially in the last couple of years, I'm going, maybe this is the new way to go. Because as you said, like I think, like, not in Ontario yet, but over time, the private schools make sense, because now you have, like, if like we have one now, I sold my actual business, and I'm running what's called the BioSteel Academy, which is obviously BioSteel is a big piece of that. So now you're attracting good players in a good program, and it's like you said, you're getting ice, you're getting a good quality program if it's done properly. But the point is that if you don't have a good program, then you don't have a good team. So I think the good thing about the academies is that, as opposed to like, because if like in the Windsor area, if you live in Windsor and there's a Windsor team and there's a county team. So if you live on one side of the street, you're not allowed to play for the county or vice versa. So
Right.
if you're in Windsor and it's just the program's not very good, you're stuck. You might have a terrible coaching and practices at 10 o'clock at night, and and then it kind of forces you to say, well, I do want to look somewhere else for, if coaching is the answer, then you're going to look somewhere else or just a good program. So
Yeah.
now if you're looking at these academies, it's like it actually starting to make a lot more sense that you
Yeah.
can choose a good program. So I think there's merit to it. Now, to me, the downfall, I don't even want to say downfall, it's just observations, is that it costs money to go to school, to one of these private schools. You might be billeting. So you want your kid to move away at 14 or 13 or 15 when he doesn't necessarily have to. And stuff like that.
Yeah.
Stuff
Yeah.
like that.
No,
It's a lot of
it adds
questions.
up. It takes, I mean, yeah, it takes away the geographic boundary issue,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the
Yeah.
CSSHL, like they don't have to, they abide by those rules. You can recruit from anywhere.
Yeah.
Um, which I don't know, is that a good thing or a bad thing? The cost, yeah, I don't know who is in charge of like how that all works, but like it's, I mean, our for instance, I mean, firsthand with Rink, like we go to a public school, so like what our fees have nothing to do with school. Like we go to a school that's local here, they just become part of that catchment, and it's a regular public school. They're in with regular population of everybody else, right? So any fees that we incur has to do with just the hockey piece of that,
Okay.
and yeah, even our AAA programs in British Columbia are really expensive. So I don't really know like what that is. It's tough because it's right from, like you said, to the equipment to the actual cost of the associations. But I mean, hockey in its essence is supposed to be, I don't know. It's just there's something blue collar about it that I love,
Yeah.
and it's obviously it's losing that flavor and that element, for good reasons. I mean, I think you mean if you're not a rich family, like it's really hard to do it, and that's super unfortunate in my mind. So I don't
Yeah.
I wish I was part of some think tank and there'd be some way to
Yeah.
to discuss that, but